Coming up on Mapperton Live.
What was it like when you first joined? So going back before you were voted as one of the 92, can you remember your first day at the Lords and your maiden speech?
I suppose it's because I find living as I get older more and more difficult. I'm less social now than I was. Probably I was much more ready to go and join groups. So I feel some regret about the passing of time.
And one of the responsibilities of the House of Lords is to scrutinise legislation that is being put forward by the Commons. We're here in the library at Mapperton and I'm here with my dad. And I thought that I would grab Dad to see whether he would be happy to talk about a subject that is quite important to our family and to his career in particular, which is the House of Lords. Dad, lots of people have obviously heard of the House of Lords and understand that it's the second chamber for Parliament in the UK. But what's it actually like being a peer? I think that's really the question that a lot of people would have. And what do you do? And maybe let's, before we get on to that, go back to the beginning. How did you become a peer in the House of Lords?
By a complete fluke. Because I was luckily able to go into the election only about 3 years after I joined the House as a hereditary peer. So this is 1995 when my father died. I was eligible and I had the summons. And so I joined just for I think it was 3.5 years. And then the new Labour government brought in a new reform, which was the end of hereditary peers except for a chosen number. And we were the ones who had to choose from 1,000 or so, only 92. And I was extremely lucky there because I was qualified through having worked with aid organisations to work and speak about international development. So that's how I got in. And it felt very good. I mean, I didn't know that I was going to do this. It was, always regarded as a sort of redundant career because it was going to be changed, but it hasn't.
Because until 1996, you had an automatic right as a hereditary to sit in the House of Lords, which of course is also an enormous fluke. I mean, it's an accident of birth that many people would argue, I think myself included, can no longer be justified. But what then happened was that with that reform, peers were voting for a smaller group of 92, and you were one of the 92 who were elected, and you're being very modest and saying that it was a bit of luck that you got that, but actually you
Well, I came in number 5 out of the crossbench peers. I decided that I didn't want to become a Liberal, which was the other alternative, or a crossbencher. So I think that was also helpful.
But you'd also impressed your peers, you'd impressed other members of the House who were voting for you, and that was why you came 5th out of how many crossbench peers at that time?
Oh, don't think I can tell you how many altogether, but we 26 was our number that we voted in. Out of, it may have been 200 or 300 anyway, yeah. I don't know.
So 5 out of 200 or 300. And I think that's also because, as you were saying, you were talking and contributing to debates on topics that not many other people had your experience and expertise in, and that was international development.
Well, that's it. I'd worked with organisations like Christian Aid, Save the Children, Care International. Anti-slavery became much more important. So I think it's luck that nobody else was qualified to talk about this, but now it's quite different. Many more people are interested in this subject.
Yeah.
Poverty overseas is on the television every day, so it's quite a different game. You have to shine in different ways. One of them is to work through a committee instead of just speaking generally. You actually have a policy development through a committee, and that's what I've been doing.
For early access to these videos, behind-the-scenes content, and other benefits, please become a patron at patreon.com/Mapperton Live.
And what was it like when you first joined? So going back before you were voted as one of the 92, can you remember your first day at the Lords and your maiden speech and how you were feeling? Were you quite apprehensive and nervous? Did it all seem like a bit of an anachronism, or did it feel very comfortable?
Do you know, I don't think I can remember. I'm sure I must have been very nervous. But it doesn't come back to me, that feeling, because I don't have that anymore. And therefore I would be, pretending, I think, if I did remember it. But it's all a matter of what you've got to say. If you're confident in that you've done the research, and because every time you speak, you follow several hours of work. And that's what most people don't realise, is that there is a great deal of research involved in whatever subject you choose. And I've enjoyed doing that, and had been a journalist working with some of these organisations, so I did know how to do it. But speaking is slightly different from writing.
Yes.
You have to be a bit more emphatic, and you've got to make sure people are listening.
But it's also, there's work behind the scenes, isn't there? Because if you've got a debate that you're leading, for example, you want to make sure that you've got other people who are going to come and speak up and support your argument.
Especially with minority subjects, and that is something I've got used to over the years. I mean, Zimbabwe and human rights is one of these where a lot of people are turned off. They don't want to listen. So you've got to select, you're quite right, and some of this is done through the all-party parliamentary groups, which tend to focus on a particular subject. Now there are millions of those groups, so they all congregate when the time comes.
And your area of specialism has been aid and international development. What are some examples, Dad, of committees or debates that you've held where you've led on a particular issue? Do you look back and think of particular moments where you feel you've had an impact?
Well, it's true that I've taken an initiative in Nepal, for instance. I've had a long connection with Nepal, and I'm on the British College in Kathmandu. And I speak about that periodically, and I belong to the all-party group on Nepal as well, which means we go and meet the ambassador or visitors from Nepal, and we try and keep up to date. I think having an influence is more difficult to prove. I think you make people more aware, and periodically Sudan is another example that comes up, and there are some very dedicated people who travel to Sudan. Still, I don't, but they know what's happening, where the local conflicts are. Ethiopia, very big subject there, because a wider number of people are interested. So we usually get 15 or more for an Ethiopian debate.
Yeah.
So it just depends what it is and how minor the minority is.
Sometimes on Mapperton Live, we like to share with you things that have moved us, things that we've found important. Maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a place we visited. Today, it's a book, and it's a book that has been written by a really good friend of ours called Rachel Kelly, and it's called You'll Never Walk Alone, Poems for Life's Ups and Downs. And Rachel writes wonderfully about life's ups and downs, And what she's done here is to put together a collection of poetry to sustain and support us when times get hard and just to keep us going. And I think it's an absolutely wonderful collection. The poem is on one side, and then we have Rachel giving some interpretation and discussion of the poem next to it. So you've got sort of both parts. And I picked out a poem here by Emily Dickinson, which I thought I'd read quickly, along with a bit of commentary from Rachel. So this is called Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash our little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. And Rachel talks about the way that there is this analogy between hope and a little bird. And she says that in stages we recognise the obstacles that hope steadily overcomes, with the last verse remaining as the most personal. Believing in this kind of hope, never ending inside us, asking nothing of us, not even crumbs, is essential. There's nothing transactional about it. It's there inside us anyway. And that is wonderful, comforting, wise advice, I think, for us all. Anyway, Rachel's book, You'll Never Walk Alone. We've put a link in the description if you'd be interested in buying a copy. It's available in the UK and also the States and probably elsewhere as well. And the link is down below. And one of the responsibilities of the House of Lords is to scrutinise legislation that is being put forward by the Commons. How much of your time at the Lords has been spent doing that?
Well, that's where the select committee system is in operation, because every time there is a bill that reflects what the government wants to do, the select committee concerned gives its opinion, and sometimes other committees like Human Rights Committee. The current example is the Australia-New Zealand trade bill, because there's been a new trading agreement with those two countries. And I'm at the moment on the International Agreements Committee, which looks at these, and that is part of a system. It's been going for about 20 years, that Parliament must look at these agreements. The government is extremely slow. It doesn't let you into the negotiations at the beginning or the middle or the end. So you have to keep hammering on the door and saying, what did you decide last week or the week before? And get ministers in and interview them. So that's probably where I've had the impact most recently.
And one of the things I think that people also know about the House of Lords is it's got an awful lot of members. In fact, it's the largest second chamber in the world. And there is some criticism that Lords have used the House of Lords somewhat as a London club, a nice place to go and see their friends, socialise, have a good meal. You and I have had some quite good meals there as well. How do you respond to that criticism?
Oh, well, it is absolutely endless. You know, people saying the whole thing is redundant. And I think Gordon Brown is the strongest voice, as an ex-Prime Minister who actually comes out firmly against the Lords in its present form. And I sympathise with a lot of that, but I don't think it'll work exactly as he presents it. I'm very unconvinced by the, for example, the regional assemblies that are going to be developed. I think the whole thing is up in the sky, really, as an idea, and it's better to, in my view, to keep to what we have but improve it. And I think the hereditary peers in the end must go, because I don't see there's any real moral question about that. But it might be it takes a whole generation. It might be that, you know, you just say your son cannot succeed from now on.
Yeah. So you're going to vote yourself out of a job, and you're going to vote me out of a job as well.
Of course, it affects you. I was just going to say, it will affect you, but I won't be there much longer anyway. So it'll not have happened by that time.
One of the points of discussion around the future of the House of Lords is the extent to which it should have elected members, in other words, members that have been elected by the general population, versus appointed members who might be appointed by a commission because of their particular expertise in a subject area. And I suppose that's one of the defences now, is that the House of Lords consists of a lot of people who have been appointed, not the hereditaries, because obviously it's been the luck of the draw, but a lot of people who have been appointed for their expertise among an awful lot of people who are slightly more questionable.
Well, I'm very pleased you said that, because I would have said it. It's the hallmark of the House of Lords, I think, is the expertise which comes from every direction on practically all subjects. We are too many. We shouldn't be 800. But as we're part-timers, there are very few are absolute regulars. It doesn't seem such a large number, but I think we should reduce to 600, something like that, overall. And then the question is, how does the government get its way if it doesn't whip all its members? And that doesn't happen with crossbenchers. So we're very lucky in that sense, that we're free to vote one way or the other.
I think I'm with you. I think appointing peers because of their expertise brings scrutiny and knowledge and a level of experience that you're simply not going to get with professional politicians.
They'd be throwing away something of huge value, you know, if that all had to start again on the basis of an election. And the other point is, you would be in competition with the House of Commons.
Yeah.
You can't have two elected chambers. It'll double the length of every bill. It'll be like the United States.
And look what's happening there at the moment as they try to appoint their speaker.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Dad, last question. I suppose, looking back, you've been at the House of Lords for 26 years?
Well, 95 would be
longer.
about 28 years.
28 years. Mm. So it's really been the majority of your career. As you look back, what do you feel about the place? I mean, you must have a great affection not just for the work you've done there, but also for the people who work there and the peers who've become your friends. Do you look back with a sense of warmth and enthusiasm?
I suppose it's because I find living as I get older more and more difficult. I'm less social now than I was. Probably I was much more ready to go and join groups. So I feel some regret about the passing of time. But we cannot carry on much over 80 unless we're very exceptional people. And there are wonderful people of 90 and so on still going strong. But that is the only thing, looking back, is I have had some wonderful advantages, but they're not there now.
Yes, but I suppose that's true of so many things in life.
It is.
But you have overall done a huge amount for the House of Lords, and I think it's also given you an enormous amount too. So
well, that's very kind of you to say that. Very kind.
What a good thing it's been.
I do know that it was an extraordinary piece of luck, the timing, and also I'm sorry that your mother, Caroline, hasn't had as much opportunity in the House, you know, as perhaps she would have liked. Just, getting to know people and coming in. She's had her own background and work in the Middle East.
She's one of those people who should have been appointed for
Or she could have been, yes.
for her expertise on the Middle East and Saudi Arabia in particular.
Well,
but
that's true.
that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that is. Thank you very much, sir, for bringing all this out. It's important.
To continue following our journey here at Britain's finest manor house, please be sure to subscribe to our channel.